Okay, everyone. Today we already heard some interesting talks, some that were talking about the future of the customer experience, that were about culture. And today I am going to talk to you about trust. So first question for my audience. Do you trust me? Trust is a firm belief in the reliability, truth, or ability of someone or something. Nowadays, there's a lot of distrust in the world. So, who do I trust? Me. It's just a little joke. The thing is, the topic itself, it's quite serious, and I know it's been a long day, so I'm gonna try and spice it up with a few examples, but it's a serious topic, and I wanna talk to you about the topic of trust, because all of us are dealing with this when we're building products. How do we make sure that customers trust our products, trust our brands? And it's not really easy. I myself, I work in the field of personalization. When you work with recommendation algorithms, there's a lot of bias. Bias sometimes in the algorithm, or also bias from people who only know about black box algorithms that don't explain itself. What we do at Speedio, we gather a lot of information about the content itself. What we basically do, we add knowledge to the data that we have about the content, so we can recommend using a human language approach. We use natural language to explain recommendations to end users. But actually, our customers are businesses. Businesses who are trying to compete with companies like Netflix. Like in their local markets, they might be a telco operator or a streaming service, and they don't have the budget to have their own data science team or a big team that works on recommendations. So we provide them with the API endpoints to be able to create a personalization experience much like the big players in the world are doing. Now back to you. What does your product do? Are you building a vitamin or a painkiller? I hope many of you know this value proposition canvas. If you don't, if you're still a bit new to our profession, please have a look at the website of Strategizer. They have amazing tools. The reason why I like this value proposition canvas is because it helps you clarify who is your customer, what are their jobs to be done, what are the gains they are looking for, what are the pains they are experiencing, and how can your product or service help them resolve those problems. Once you figure that out, you can build habits. I think many of you know this book. Either you've read it or heard about it. Right now, it's created a little bit of a discussion in our industry. Do we still want to create models that hook users? I think there's a lot of good to this as well. It's good to understand what drives people and to understand their motivations. Like, are they trying to improve their lives? Are they experiencing pain and they're trying to find something that will relieve them from their struggles? So it's good to understand the motivation and also to think if your product or service gives them the ability to use your service in an easy way, like remove the friction. And then, of course, there's also the triggers. Why do I need to use this product or service now? You can think of the notifications you receive, or in my case, I'm wearing this Fitbit, and when I'm sitting on my ass for too long, it will give me a little nudge to get up and walk around and be a bit more active. But there are also the internal triggers, and those are a bit trickier, and I'm going to talk to you about this in a bit. Okay, I'm just hoping, yeah, there we go. Because another important part of this hook model is the variable reward. Us human beings, we want to build relationships. For that, there are great social media platforms out there, and of course, they come with their good and their bad sides, but in some ways, it's brought us together. Like, we human beings like to build relationships. We also like to grow our skills, grow competence. And yes, it's important for us to also feel autonomous. I think a great example of a positive product that builds on this tribe culture is, for instance, Stack Overflow. If you have a question, you can go there, someone will help you with an answer, and the credibility of the answer and the person is upvoted by other users. I think that's a great thing. Problem comes a little bit at the investment side. We human beings tend to overvalue the work we've already put in. So when you're using a service, and you've invested a lot of your time, you're kind of afraid to stop doing it, to drop the habit. Because we're consistent with our past behaviors, it's in our psychology. And we're also anticipating the future rewards, like for instance, getting nice little buzzes from my Fitbit when I reach my 10,000 steps. I personally don't think that's a bad thing as long as it's around a positive habit. If it's something that betters my life, that helps me, for instance, be more active, get a better understanding of my health, how much I'm sleeping. But yes, I'm also aware that I'm sharing my data with another company, a company that just got bought by Google. I'm not paranoid. I think in this case, like I'm still happy with the product, and I, for instance, don't wear it when I'm sleeping because for me, that's certain information that I don't want to share, but in the end, we have a choice. I also think there's a lot of good that has to do with gamification. Think of apps like Waze. Waze helps people actually understand what's happening in terms of traffic, find you better routes, and it's actually the people, the community itself, that gives the information on where to drive, where to go. It's being even preferred by car manufacturers right now because the data is so much more accurate. On a slightly more negative side, there are dating apps like Happen, who introduced a new feature, I think a year and a half, 2 years ago, that's called Crush Time. It was a way to bring people back to their platform on a daily basis. What they would do is they would present you with 4 profiles of people that might have liked you, and you had to guess which one was it. And if you guessed right, you would be a match. So it was basically to spark conversations faster. My problem with this approach is the fact that they wouldn't tell you that if you had a bad guess, it would tell the other user in a new game that you liked them. So the app didn't tell me about this. It's something that you learn along the way, and I personally did not like that. For me, that creates a bit of distrust. Still, I mean, I have a choice. Do I want to use this app to find love in my life? Well, luckily, I don't need that anymore. But it's a choice that you make yourself, but I don't like it when a product is hiding information from me that's important. And I'm going to come back to you about that in a bit. But I want to make the switch to good ethics and why this is important. So we've talked a bit about the hook model. I know a lot of you are like, I like it, but this whole addiction, it's not really a good thing. And indeed, if you use it for the wrong purposes, people will feel anxious. 8 in 10 people in France say that they actually feel a stronger anxiety around hyperconnectivity. It provokes anxiety, it's perceived as something negative, and 4 in 10 are actually addicted to their smartphone. French government tried to promote a healthier work environment by, for instance, introducing a law 2 years ago that gives you the right to disconnect. It basically tells you as an employee that you can't use your emails after a certain hour, and companies are kind of not allowed to send you emails after that hour either, to make sure that you don't get this feeling of, I can't disconnect from my job. Luckily, there are good initiatives out there as well. A couple of years ago, there was this notion around calm technology. I guess maybe my Fitbit is considered that way. They were talking about examples like the Roomba, this little robot that's cleaning your house, and like using small signals like a little light and not a lot of noise to make technology a bit more friendly. And I see that even Apple and Facebook are making progress. They're giving you the possibility to see how much time am I spending on screens and give you the possibility to reduce your time. As you can see in my Instagram overview, I set a limit to 25 minutes, and yes, I reached 24 on average, so I'm actually reducing my time. And the fact that the app helps me be aware of the time that I'm spending on there makes me feel a bit more positive. Because yes, sometimes I do like to scroll around the feed, but ideally to get inspired or look at my friends' stories, but not to waste my time and feel guilty afterwards that I could have been a lot more productive. On the other side, we have a growing power in the world, which is China. China is basically already leading the world around AI. Very simply because they have a huge data set of their population. And unlike in Europe, where we have these great initiatives where we're trying to protect users' data, and similarly, I would say in the US, they treat it slightly differently. The government introduced a new program that they're going to launch next year, but they've been testing it already, which is called social credit. So instead of me choosing to use a device that's going to give me gentle nudges to improve my behavior, they're actually trying to improve the behavior of their citizens through a credit system. If you, for instance, go through a red traffic light, they don't need a police officer anymore to fine you. They use facial recognition to recognize, hey, you went through the red light, and you get a fine sent to your home. that would still be okay. You know, it's not something that we would like, but that's one part of the technology. The worst part comes after. If you've been displaying bad behavior, you actually get a lower ranking on the social credit scale, which will affect if you can get a mortgage, if you can travel freely, if you can apply for a job, or even worse, leave the country. We might feel this is a kind of a faraway situation, and how did they come up with that? Actually, it's based on our own credit systems. Here in Europe, when you want to apply for a loan or get some credit, you also get checked. And then there's lots of companies who have these loyalty programs that are semi-secretly sharing your information with other companies because it's hidden somewhere in the terms and conditions that they can. Lastly, I think many of you here know TikTok. TikTok is owned by ByteDance, one of the big companies in China at the moment. We have BAT, which is Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. But actually, Baidu is losing some of its market share, and people say ByteDance is going to be the next B. So that's something to reflect upon, because even if we set different standards here, if you're using products from a different market, you don't know exactly what's happening with your data. Even if the CEO of ByteDance, of TikTok, said they're not sharing data with China, we're not completely sure, are we? So I want to wrap this part up by basically giving you a little message, like, if you're not sure about how to apply good ethics, just think about, is the habit I'm creating a positive one? Will this benefit my user? And think of it as a human being, as if it's yourself, your family, your friends. Think of technology as something that can be perceived as a friendly helper, and remain critical about people's privacy. Because technology in the wrong hands, not a good idea. You want to make sure the right person is in control. Okay, so I'm going to switch to the main part of my presentation, which is radical transparency. The reason I wanted to do this introduction is kind of give you an understanding of these processes that maybe some of you have also been going through when developing products. Like at some point, we're like very excited when we managed to increase engagement metrics on our platforms, and now we're like, okay, but if people are getting addicted, and are we doing the right thing? So there are a couple of companies who are at the forefront of improving technology in a more transparent manner, a radically transparent manner, which is funny because I saw a reference to this before as well. And one thing that you can ask yourself whenever you're working on a specific feature or building your product is think if you're maximizing understanding for your user. And it's a very simple question. It's like, am I withholding information to maximize their understanding or to obstruct it? It's the same thing in our everyday life. Like, if a child asks you a question, why do planes fly? You're not going to explain the whole theory around aerodynamics to them. You're going to pick up a paper plane and show them, you know, there's like friction in the air. You're trying to give them a snippet of the information they need to know. Same thing with your product. When I sign up for your service, I don't want to know everything about it. You need to dose information. But it's very good to take a step back and realize, okay, am I maximizing the understanding here, or am I hiding potentially crucial information? And if I am, because I can't put 10 pages of copy on my first page, how am I going to treat this in the next step? It's also important to realize, okay, who's my audience? Is this the right time? And at what device are they actually accessing the content? So, talk about maximizing understanding. When I read this article from David Schreiber, the CEO of Lemonade, we were in the process of launching a new software as a service platform. So I described before, we have this enterprise product for recommendation APIs, and we wanted to make it more accessible to other industries as well. Our target is creative industries, and our audience is quite sensitive to the black box algorithms that they've, learned about, and they're afraid about their creative content and how it's being shared with users. So our customers who were signing up for the beta program, obviously they had to accept some terms and conditions. We gave them the possibility to use our product for free, but in return, we did expect some feedback from them. And obviously, we're going to ask them, look, we're still building our product, so don't share this openly. Like, please just share it with us. You're basically signing an NDA, and if you want us to remove your information, just send us a message. And, oh yeah, here's a link to our full terms and conditions, but we wanted to make sure that we phrased the most important things in the first message when they were signing up. I think another company who does a good job, and I've fortunately been seeing more and more of those, is the BBC with their cookie policy. If I have a cookie policy that just says, I accept the terms and conditions or I accept your cookie policy and there's only a link there, I don't really know what I'm saying yes to. But if I have the possibility to select, okay, yes, strictly necessary cookies or functional cookies, performance cookies, I at least have an understanding what they're used for, and if I want more information, I can click on it. I already think this is a more transparent way of handling GDPR regulations and such. You could take it a step further. In the fashion e-commerce industry, there are a couple of companies that I admire for their openness. One example is Everlane. Everlane is showing the whole pricing from their supply chain. So how much did it cost in the materials? How much was the hardware, the labor, the duties? They give you all the information about the pricing behind their products, and they compare it to the market. Of course, this is also a way for them to show, look, we're cheaper than the rest. But they don't stop there. They also show the provenance of the product. So where was it produced? What were the materials? Another company called Reformation is actually calculating your carbon footprint. If I were to buy those jeans, how much carbon footprint am I actually creating here? And what's it like compared to another pair of jeans? Again, smart strategy. But there are a few companies out there who are helping other companies, so the B2B side, also develop provenance around their products. There's a company actually called Provenance in the UK doing this for the food industry, for supermarkets who want to show to their customers where was the fish bought, or where was the fish caught, and then what process did it go through before it ended up in my supermarket. Problem that you won't have here in Portugal because everything is fresh, of course, but it depends a bit where you live. And a transparent company who's doing a similar thing in the fashion industry. They also use a label that you can scan, like a QR code, to show the provenance of how was this piece of clothing created, what were the fabrics being used, is it sustainable, etc. Back to my own industry, the entertainment industry. We see a shift here as well, because generally speaking, people spend 8 to 10 minutes searching for content on an SVOD platform. This is from a recent research done by the Nielsen team. But there are other researchers out there that also say that on average, we spend at least an hour a day searching for content in a broader sense, whether it's to read, to watch, to listen, etc. I wouldn't say searching is per se bad. Like sometimes we're just exploring, we're browsing, that's great. But the same research actually says that 21% of people who are trying to find content to watch give up. They don't end up watching anything. So that gives us an indication. Maybe recommendations have a problem. Maybe we're not displaying the content the right way. Question for my audience. Who's a coffee lover here? Okay. How many of those coffee lovers also have a cat? Okay. There's not per se a very clear connection here. So let's say you go on this e-commerce website and you're looking for an espresso machine. Maybe you'll get recommended a cat scratching pole to buy with it, because frequently bought together. I'm missing the context here, and that context is missing in more of these situations. I'm not saying we have the perfect solution. I actually think the solution lies also in giving your end users more control over recommendations, giving more explicit feedback. So what we try to do at Speedio is, as we're a B2B company, we kind of need to sell to our customers a vision of what you could do with our technology to, for instance, make your platform more transparent. In this case, I did a little onboarding process because we have the technology for that, and I selected 4 video titles that I really love watching. Based on that, it generated what we call a taste profile, or user semantic fingerprint, to speak in our technical terms. And based on this profile, I get recommendations for me. The difference here is, though, I actually see what data you're collecting around me, around my taste and my psychographics. And I also get to interact with them. This basically works like a personalized mood board. So it's another way for me to discover content I might want to watch. More importantly, if I've already watched something, I can remove it from my recommendations. And if I didn't like it, I can tell the recommendation algorithm so it won't recommend this to me again. Yes, there is a like and a dislike button on many of our content platforms. But do you know that actually your algorithm learns better if you give it occasional negative feedback? Like, an algorithm learns from your preferences, sure, but it learns even more along the way when you say, oh, but that's a bad recommendation. Earlier this year, I spoke at a conference from Mind the Product. It's a smaller one, Mind the Product Engage in Hamburg. And there was one talk there that resonated a lot with me. It was around the Copenhagen catalog. It's 150 principles, new principles for tech, created by people at the conference itself. Basically, people came together and started talking, okay, what do we see in the future of developing products, in the future of technology? And I picked out a few that I personally really like. First of all, I make the same mistake. I talk about my users, our end users. Maybe we should replace that. We're, in the end, building for digital citizens. Say no more often. I guess all of you love this one. It's called November. I read this tweet from Jenna Basto the other day. It was like, okay, it's November. Try and say no more to your stakeholders, because every little change, every small request that they have, it might deviate your roadmap. And especially if we're in November right now, like Christmas is around the corner. We don't want to break our roadmaps right now because it creates a lot of risk. But generally speaking, I think saying no, it's not just product people. It's also engineers and designers. Like, talking about some of the mistakes we've seen in the past and the whistleblowers we now see on stage when it's, for instance, about the health data that is being collected by certain companies that is not anonymized, where people are speaking out like, this is not okay. You always have the possibility to say no. Whatever role you have, you can say, no, is this the right thing to build? Why are we doing this? Is this ethical? The other one that I like a lot is make transparency meaningful. It shouldn't be cognitively painful to understand the products. Well, I gave you already some examples before. So just to sum it up, how to be transparent? Maximize the understanding of your product or service. Explain the why. Why are you doing this? What is your intention behind it? And have a look at the Copenhagen catalog. I think it would be great for you to have some inspiration there. I'm talking about radical transparency and trust because the bigger topic here is kind technology. We're building products for people. So kindness is a way to also set an example. I would even take it a step further. There's this report, a trend report from WGSN that I read the other day, which introduces kindness as a KPI. You could see it as your net promoter score or your customer experience and their satisfaction, but maybe it's a broader topic. The reason why I'm bringing this up is another report said that 42% of consumers actually walk away when disappointed by a brand. Disappointed by a brand in different ways. Like, we can all have a bad experience. Sometimes shit just goes wrong, and that's okay. It's more how a brand then tackles the conversation with its audience after. Like, a lot of people go to social media to complain. And if you then don't tackle the problem the right way, this is when people get really pissed off. 1 in 5 people actually walk away and never come back to your brand. So it's really important to understand, okay, if we're making mistakes, let's be transparent about it. And if it's about our brand and we get new investment, who are our investors? What are their goals? Like, let's not hide the new intentions or the different direction our company might take. On another note, something a little bit more sad, I would say, is that some people actually say that human contact is becoming a luxury good. This is an article I read in the New York Times earlier this year, where they say screens used to be for the elite, and now avoiding them is a status symbol. I've been talking about this disconnecting and the reflections that we're doing, but we're in a privileged position. There's a lot of people who actually now depend on technology, sometimes for good reasons. They give an example actually in this article about an older man who's feeling a bit lonely, and he has this little personal assistant that's keeping him company and making him feel less lonely. Technology can be a helper in that sense as well. But it's kind of sad if the human contact itself is becoming a luxury good. And in this sense, I would say us as product managers have a role to humanize the technology that we're working on. Lastly, personal data, it's also about taking control yourself. Being aware, if you access a certain platform and they're asking for your cookies and they're asking for your information, you're signing up, like we are end users too. we can also reflect ourselves about, I want to sell my own data. See what you're going to give me for it. And I actually think it's a bit of a joke, but it might go that direction where actually products and services are going to ask us, how much are you willing to share it to get a specific discount? It's already happening in China where you can get buy-in from your friends and family to get discounts on products. So it's not just a dystopian view, actually. So to wrap that up, how to use kind technology. Think of this kindness as a KPI. Make your technology and the products that you're building, make them more human. And build trust through a transparent approach. That was it for me today. Thank you very much, and let me know if you have questions after. I'll be around for the after party.